Welcome to the Explainer. So let's just dive right into it. Today, we're looking at exactly how fast water can completely destroy a home, right here in Morrisville, North Carolina, and the rigorous, honestly fascinating science required to stop it in its tracks. We usually think of a leak as just a minor inconvenience, right? You grab some towels, maybe a bucket, and you figure you're good to go. But as we're going to see from our source material today, provided by Silverline Water Damage Restoration, a minor leak is actually a ticking time bomb waiting to go off. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the Morrisville moisture problem, the ticking clock of water damage, the categories of water damage, the restoration process, and finally, we'll wrap up with the science of drying. All right, let's start with Section 1, the Morrisville moisture problem, and why our specific climate makes leaks so much worse. Imagine this for a second. You've got 75% summer humidity, and then you combine that with a sudden afternoon thunderstorm that drops 2+ inches of rain in under an hour. I mean, you're immediately asking for trouble. Now let's add our heavy Carolina clay soil into the mix. The exact kind of soil you find all around neighborhoods like Breckenridge or the Church Street corridor. When that clay gets saturated, it swells aggressively. It literally expands and pushes groundwater directly against your foundation walls and deep into your crawl spaces. And hey, it's not just the weather. A lot of older homes around here have galvanized supply lines nearing the end of their lifespan, or they're dealing with winter freeze-thaw cycles that slowly weaken exterior lines. Basically, these local vulnerabilities mean a tiny leak can escalate into a full-blown emergency in no time. Now, you might be thinking, well, I live in a newer build near Morrisville Carpenter Road, so I'm totally safe from this stuff. Actually, scratch that. Newer construction carries its own hidden risks, specifically with improperly installed vapor barriers. See, instead of protecting your home from the outside elements, a flawed vapor barrier actually traps seasonal condensation right inside the wall assemblies. Day after day, it's just in there, feeding hidden rot and creating severe moisture issues way before you'd ever see a single drop of water on your floor. And we definitely can't forget about geography, which is pretty unforgiving here. If your property happens to sit near historic waterways, like Crabtree Creek, you aren't just looking at a one-off risk. You're facing severe, repetitive flooding every single time a major tropical system stalls over the triangle. The water tables rise, the drainage systems completely overflow, and suddenly, your living room is entirely at the mercy of the creek. Which brings us to Section 2, the ticking clock. This is literally a race against water. 6 feet per hour. Let that sink in. That is the terrifying rate at which water spreads horizontally across your flooring and wicks straight up into your wall cavities. Your drywall acts exactly like a giant, dry sponge. It pulls that moisture forcefully across the studs, up into the insulation, and deep into the baseboards, long after that visible puddle on your floor has dried up. So it looks like a totally contained spill is actually actively climbing the inside of your walls. And then we hit the next critical threshold, 48 hours. That's all the time you have. If you leave it unchecked, dangerous mold doesn't just start to grow. It rapidly colonizes your drywall, your insulation, and your structural framing within just 48 hours of that initial water intrusion. So looking at this exact timeline, you can see exactly why professional intervention is an absolute race against the clock. At 0 hours, the leak begins. By hour 1, professional teams like Silverline are aiming to dispatch and immediately set up emergency containment using these massive, heavy-duty truck-mounted extractors. This rush is entirely about beating that 48-hour mold colonization window. If they can get the standing water out and start the intensive 3 to 7 day structural drying process right away, they can stop a fairly minor washing machine leak from turning into a devastating $15,000 remediation project where your walls have to be completely demolished. Okay, moving right along to Section 3, categories of water damage, because as it turns out, not all leaks are created equal. The industry uses the IICRC-certified standard, which officially grades water damage into 3 distinct categories. Category 1 is clean water. Think of a burst supply line under your bathroom sink. It's a minimal health risk initially, but it still needs immediate extraction. Then you have Category 2, which is gray water. This is an overflowing dishwasher or washing machine. It carries a moderate contamination risk, including microorganisms, and it definitely requires professional antimicrobial treatment. Finally, Category 3 is black water. We're talking sewage backups or river floods. This is an extreme biological hazard full of pathogens, meaning you absolutely have to throw away all affected porous materials. And here is the real kicker. Category 1 clean water degrades into Category 2 water in just a matter of hours as it spreads and touches dust, dirt, and building materials. So yeah, your clean leak, it simply doesn't stay clean for long. All right, Section 4, the restoration process. How do we actually stop the damage once it starts? Halting this kind of destruction happens in 3 sequentially coordinated phases. Step 1 is emergency extraction and containment. You get the standing water out, but you also meticulously set up negative air pressure so the evaporating moisture doesn't drift over and ruin perfectly dry rooms in your house. Step 2 is structural drying and rigorous moisture monitoring, and that's where the real science comes in. Finally, step 3 involves the actual restoration, heavy antimicrobial treatments to definitively kill off the mold, and final clearance testing. That clearance testing is absolutely vital for you as the homeowner because it's your documented proof that the space is safe to live in again. You really need all 3 of these steps coordinated under one roof. Otherwise, you're stuck frantically playing middleman between a cleanup crew, a mold company, and a general contractor. And that leads us perfectly into Section 5, the science of drying. Believe me, this goes way beyond just shop vacs and box fans. To really mitigate North Carolina's heavy humidity, you can't just plug in a fan and blow air around. It requires psychrometry. Fancy word, right? But it's basically the deep study of moist air thermodynamics. Technicians are out there literally calculating vapor pressure differentials and finding the precise dew point inside your living room. They bring in massive commercial dehumidifiers to forcefully pull trapped moisture out of saturated building materials and into the air, where it can be condensed and safely drained away. It is highly technical mathematical work that dictates exactly where and how every single piece of equipment is placed. And the ultimate goal of all that advanced science is hitting what's called equilibrium moisture content, or EMC for short. This is the exact state where your wet building materials, like your internal wall framing and subfloors, finally reach a stable moisture balance that perfectly matches the totally dry, unaffected areas of your home. And they don't just guess when they've hit this mark. Technicians log readings twice a day using deep penetrating moisture meters to scientifically verify that your walls are truly, fundamentally dry all the way through, not just dry to a quick touch. When you stack these professional methods up against DIY approaches side by side, the dangers of doing it yourself become blindingly obvious. A cut-rate handyman armed with a shop vac and some hardware store box fans is relying entirely on guesswork. And that guesswork almost always leaves hidden pockets of moisture trapped inside your wall cavities. Professionals, on the other hand, deploy thermal imaging cameras so they can literally see the invisible water hiding behind your drywall. They use hydroxyl generators to break down musty odors at a microscopic molecular level. And, probably most importantly for your wallet, they provide daily moisture logs and use carrier-approved Aximate software to make absolutely sure your insurance company covers the true cost of the damage. I really want to highlight this specific quote from the source material. It says, "Corners don't get cut because structural drawing done wrong creates mold farms inside your walls that costs triple to fix 6 months later." Let that sink in for a second. Cutting corners during a water cleanup isn't some clever shortcut. It's a massively expensive trap. If you only dry the surface of your carpet and totally ignore the damp baseboards and the soaked insulation right behind them, you are literally farming mold inside your own house. So we've seen how deceptively fast water spreads, how North Carolina's brutal humidity just constantly compounds the thread, and the incredibly rigorous science required to actually restore a property the right way. Thank you so much for joining this explainer. I'm going to leave you to think about this final question. When the next major moisture event inevitably hits Morrisville, how prepared are you to win the race against the clock?